Authors Press.
Hey there, Buzzers. How's it going? Welcome back to Book Buzz, where we dive into the latest and greatest in the literary world. I'll be your host, Nick, and today we have a very special guest, Harold Weist, who has written, we're going over your book, Trek for the Cross. And Harold, if you'd like to introduce yourself, please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, my name is, of course, Harold Weist. I'm 88 years old. I'm a retired Marine, and I've worked in several levels of security. And I've been retired for quite a few years, and I just try to enjoy things one day at a time.
I love that philosophy.
Yeah.
So, Harold, can you tell us a little bit about Trek for the Cross? What inspired you to write this book?
Well, actually, it started with book 3. Book 3, I started with the prologue was loosely based on an incident I had in Vietnam, and Jade Cross popped up in it. So I had to have a Jade Cross from someplace. So that's how I began to Trek for the Cross in order to have a Jade Cross in book 3, of course.
Mm-hmm. So that's interesting that you said that especially like your experience in Vietnam kind of inspired you. But what made you choose the setting for the 16th century China for this book?
Well, I'm not really sure about that. I did not want to go too far back into Vietnamese history or anything.
Mm-hmm.
And this is right after the ages of the Portuguese and the Jesuit priests and so on and so forth, and the development of the Vietnamese language into a printed form and so on and so forth. So that's basically how I kind of chose that era.
So what challenges did you face while you were writing this book?
I don't believe there was really any challenge at all. Just periodically, I would see these things as kind of an image going along, and then I would just type in how I kind of interpreted that particular picture in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, it'd be sometimes that I might write 2-3 days in a row, then I might have a kind of a blank for a couple days, and then all of a sudden there'd be a segment of the book in my mind, and I would sit down and work over that.
Yeah. Well, can you share any interesting anecdotes or experiences that you had while you were writing the Trek for the Cross?
The which?
Yeah, no, just can you share any interesting anecdotes or experiences that you had while you were writing this?
I don't think I really did have anything. It just, from time to time, as I say, things would pop up in my mind, and nothing out of the ordinary in life was happening, and like I say, I just did things as it popped up.
Well, did you encounter any difficulties while researching the historical aspects of the story?
No, I did not, because I had a regular tour in Vietnam, and I had 2 temporary assignments. I worked a lot with the rural people, and plus I had a course in the Vietnamese language from the Department of Defense and so on and so forth. So I had an idea of what Vietnamese rural life was like, and also a lot of books. Like there was one about Vietnam by Stanley Carno, a great big thick book, and I have several small books that talks about different things in the leading into the uh, conflict in Vietnam after the signing of the Geneva Accords. So I had kind of a basis there, and I just kind of went through things and tried to uh, just just let them emerge in my imagination along with my characters.
Mm-hmm. I mean, how do you feel your experience in Vietnam influenced the story or your interest here?
Well, what started out, I used to write these little 2 and 3 page report like things on things that I had learned through life, experiences I had, things I learned, so on and so forth. And I did a few little things that, about my experiences in the military, and one of them was a particular time when I was actually in charge of a patrol, and we were ambushed by friendlies and so on and so forth. And I typed that in, and for some reason or other, I kept tweaking it. And the next thing you know, I've got myself a prologue for book 3. So, and going into book 3, I had to have some way to produce a cross. So that's what started the development of the Trek for the Cross.
Hmm. Now, I found it interesting that you said that you used to kind of write 2 to 3 pages about your life. Have you always been doing that, or did that mainly start when you were over in Vietnam?
What do you mean, writing?
Yeah.
Well, actually, you could say I did quite a few reports working with the people,
Hmm.
and so I think that might have been a kind of a basis for my uh, interest in typing in some of these things. And of course, they'll be there when I pass away, and they go through everything in my computer. They'll find a lot of these things,
Hmm.
and I even have a right now it's an 11 page uh, report on the open arms program they had because I was involved in it
Yeah.
uh, in some instances, and it was very interesting because it tells about how these people are treated who were working with the enemy and they return to the government,
Yeah.
to the free side, how they were treated and their benefits and so on and so forth. So I was already kind of familiar with that.
Hmm. I mean, did you find that there were any specific themes or messages that you wanted to convey through the journey and hardships faced by these characters?
Uh, I wanted him to be a very staunch man, one who believed in uh, people's rights. He believed in his country, and he spent his life more or less fighting for the country and going on secret missions and things. And he had to be a staunch individual, but yet strong and yet humble
Hmm.
and dedicated.
Yes.
And the dedication was probably, I would say, foremost about his character.
Hmm. And for the character like Troung Van Ba, was this kind of based off of like an old friend, or how'd you get the name? Is there a significance to that name?
Oh, well, I want to probably hundreds of different names in Vietnam. And as
Yeah.
an example, you go into a hamlet and you say, I want to speak to Troung Van Ba, and probably 20 people might hold it. It's like going to a place and say, I want to talk to James Smith or something, you know.
Yeah, yeah. So how did you develop this character? What were the key aspects you wanted to portray through him?
I want him to be strong. I want him to be able to serve his country and be the type of individual uh, who would go out and be able to meet and handle any difficulties that come along,
Mhm.
and and he would be the type that would dedicate his life to his mission, and he would lose his life if necessary, and he knows that. And like I say, he's strong,
Yeah.
and he just goes along and does his job like any hero.
Yeah. Well, and what motivated you to create, Tran Thi Mot as kind of as like the foil, right? I believe it's the 16-year-old guide. How did her character evolve throughout the story?
Well, supposedly he was to take a trek by himself into China.
Hmm.
But when you stop and think about somebody trekking over the Annamites, uh, it's kind of be kind of a difficult segment of a story to write. So I decided to, in these substations that offers food and comfort for them,
Hmm.
to find out that the original plan was compromised and something new was set up. And the society uh, gave him a guide. He, of course, had kind of almost a violent reaction to being given a woman guide, because he's always done things by himself. And of course, in Vietnamese society, in some cases, the women were just a little bit below the man.
Hmm.
So he originally kind of took it as kind of an insult.
Yeah.
And of course, he uh, uh, had expressed that verbally. And she, of course, felt the same way. She, uh, as a young girl, more or less became an orphan and had to do on her own. And in her guiding and everything, she would encounter a lot of these people who were not, I would say, really honest about dealing with women, and they would want to take advantage of her sexually and things of that nature.
Hmm.
And she took martial arts, and she learned how to take care of herself and be wary of all her leches, you might say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and there, I would love for you to kind of discuss more the role of friendship in the story and how it impacts a character's journey. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Uh, I'm not sure I caught the question you were asking. Sorry,
Yeah.
can you?
No, of course. I'm just talking about, the relationship here that gets formed between the two
Oh,
protagonists.
oh,
Just
themes and messages.
no, can you just discuss like the role of friendship that and the significance on
Oh,
this?
the friendship.
Yeah, and how it
Well,
impacts the characters.
they, of course, had to depend upon each other.
Hmm.
And I think it developed because he was a different type of man. He was not actually after her sexually and things of that nature, and he had rebuffed her, and he had shown a certain strength. And of course, as a guide, I'm sure she had a lot of people who couldn't keep up, would fall back, with things of this nature. And but he was staunch and he held up his own end of the journey. And I think that's partly how uh, it started to develop. And of course, it was cold out. And when they get these substations in places, and at nights when they would camp out, they would have to kind of sleep bundled together with all of their little blankets and mats and things. And I think this is what started her attraction to him, because he was kind of rebuffing her, but at the same time he had kind of grown to getting used to her, and so it kind of developed along the way like that, and just similar to how a lot of people in the beginning when they meet, they don't really care about the other person, but but for some reason or other, they always end up together someplace, and they gain a respect, and that respect sometimes develops into love between them, and so on and so forth, and they end up being a couple one way or another.
Did you find this to be a significant element to the plot? Like, did you, the love story?
It's I'm sorry to.
No, I was just asking if did you find this like love element to be a significant um plot in the story?
Yes, I really did, because the story also ends up being a love story, and of course is I'm sure if you've gone through the epilogue, the end of it, it shows the enduring love that developed between the two for their lives.
Hmm. And in contrast of the love and the friendship here, I wanted to kind of touch on um, the action sequences and the bandits and the enemies. Like, how did you approach writing those?
Well, if you've ever looked at any kung fu movies or things of this nature, you always find out there's bandits and things on the road, and it's the same thing. It would be in Vietnam. They're the vagabonds, and they gang together and they take advantage of travelers, or they go into hamlets, subhamlets, and they rouse the people and steal things from them, rape their women, uh, all kind of bad things. It's
Yeah.
because it's just the nature of the times.
Yeah. Hmm.
And
And
and of course, some of them was based on uh, enemies of the No Name Society, and they were probably the worst.
yeah, and actually, I wanted that was my next question. How did you come up with the idea of the No Name Society and its role in the story?
Well, I wanted to put them into society, uh, and I really couldn't come up with a name. So I said, well, let's do it no name. So it ends up the No Name Society, and was it started off being kind of a bad organization, but it ended up being uh, a pro people, and with the belief that at least two portions of Vietnam should be uh, brought together as one, which would be the north and the central.
Mhm.
Yeah, because the southern part, that's what eventually became Cochin China, part of Indochina.
Yes.
But that really didn't appear in it. We were just worrying about the North. The North had several different names, and I just used the one Dai Viet for it. And of course, the Central was always Annam.
Yeah. And so, how did you find that your personal like opinions and I guess like in your own interpretation of the Vietnam experience, how do you find your voice through this book?
Well, I think it began when I first started dealing with rural people during the conflict, and I did deal with a lot of them because of my job. And the people were caught in the middle. They either you were, well, let's say, during the day in many areas, the people would be uh, would work with the free world forces, and
Hmm.
at night they would be controlled by the Viet Cong.
Yes.
And the people had their journeys were arduous. You'd always see people working out in the fields. You see them irrigating their rice paddies,
Hmm.
and they would be out there in the sun all day long, working hard. And I just kind of had a feeling for those people because the military over there fighting didn't
Hmm.
understand the people because they were never told, and they had the idea that the people were uneducated.
Yeah.
Well, or rather not uneducated, but dumb. But the problem was they didn't have the same education that we have. But you sit down and talk to them about how they irrigate their fields and their rice paddies, how they actually plant the rice, and how they plow their fields, how they take care of their caribou, and yet at the same time uh, fighting two leaders more or less. During the day, the government side, and at night, having to put up with the Viet Cong,
Hmm.
who had come into their hamlets, and they created these little associations in there, like Farmers Association, Old Man's Association, Security, so things of this nature, and the people would have to participate in them, and they would be broke down into cells and everything, and they really led a difficult life, but yet you see they were very staunch,
Hmm.
and they did what they had to do, and like I said, during the day it was great because it's not every place, but it was in the areas where the government forces and free world forces
Yeah.
had influence. So and you really had to feel for the people because uh, I don't know how many Americans uh, could have functioned under the same way that they had to.
Hmm. And so, tying back to kind of your personal experience with this, did you face any personal struggles or challenges as an author while working on this book?
Uh, I think my biggest challenge was to be able to keep things consistently and not overdo any, because on this trip I could have put in more bandits and things, and I could have done made the book a little longer by having more problems after they actually got to cross, and so on and so forth. And to keep from going overboard, I think was my major challenge. And maybe in some places, some of the knowledge that I had of being in Vietnam and so on and so forth, to keep that out of there. I just try to keep it basically uh,
Hmm.
the life in that type of culture they had back in the end of the 16th century and so on and so forth. And I didn't want to get into anything that dealt with the present war.
Yeah.
As an example, I'll make a little comment about that when we talk about book 3 later on. I think it's a pretty good read. I've had talked to a couple people that has read the book, and they enjoyed it. They thought it was good. As I say, just keeping things status quo for the end of the 16th century, and
Yeah.
That's basically it.
Well, touching on what you were just talking about, how you've heard some feedback, I'd love to kind of know what do you hope that readers will take away from Trek for the Cross?
I think what I would like to see him take away the idea that it was a good read, a good book, and it was true to the area or the era in which it happened and things of this nature. I just want people to enjoy the book, and I'll be truthful with you. When composing this book, continually going to and from editing sequences and trying to make sure everything is parsed properly, and no grammatical mistakes and so on, and all that stuff that involves. But when it came out in book form, to go ahead and read the book that I had written, I thought was a really good experience for me, because it was just different from facing a computer screen with it quite often there.
Yeah.
And I did like the book. In the epilogue, the ending was kind of hard, because you feel these characters and you get a feeling for them, and to set up their demise is kind of hard. I know one lady that got the book, I told her to make sure you had a box of hankies at the end. But I don't go into real deep descriptions, because I hope that the people can develop their own picture of the individuals as they read the book.
Yeah.
I know I have read so many, but I remember one time reading some book where authors took a page and a half as one paragraph describing a character. And I thought that was really exciting, and it becomes boring and you want to put it down.
Yeah.
So I just hope that people can make their own picture of the two. And of course, the enemies.
Yes.
And I would like to say that the interrogation portions in the book, you'll notice there's nothing physical. It's all psychological.
Yeah.
And that was kind of easy to do, really, because my life in the Marine Corps was an interrogator translator, and also I had some stints as intelligence chiefs and also as an intelligence analyst. So that kind of lays out a little bit more about myself.
Yeah.
And so I really had a kind of a feeling, because I dealt with all kinds, not just the rural people, but also with the enemy, with actual Viet Cong, and sitting across the little table from somebody that just would would just love to jump across the table and kill you or something like that. Is the kind
Yeah.
kind of a weird situation.
Yeah.
But I wanted to keep away from anything that would reflect bad on the Vietnamese people themselves. And if the Vietnamese reads the book, I would hope they would be able to picture things in according with what they know about their country.
Yes. Nice. Well, I'd like to take a step back from the book, and just, ask you, just personally, what are some key lessons or experiences from your own writing career that you would like to share with aspiring authors?
Uh, I'm sorry. Uh, Even though I got my hearing aids in, I'm still hard
Yeah,
hearing, and I didn't quite catch it.
yeah, I was just saying, I'd like to just step out of the book for a little bit and just
Oh, sure.
talk to you directly as an
Oh,
author.
sure.
Yeah, what are some key lessons or experiences from your own writing career that you would like to share with aspiring authors?
Well, tell them, first of all, uh, once your work is complete, be careful who you go to have to handle your situation, because there's a lot of organizations out there that just want to take your buck, and
Well,
so you have to be very careful. And I think Authors Press is one of the better ones,
hmm,
and they're helping me with some other things. But I would say try to be true to your characters, and don't let mental blocks bother you. If you can't think of something, well, you all of a sudden you may dream something one night about it, which I know I have, or you might just run into some certain situation yourself and say, "Hey, gee, I can probably work this into my book," or things of this nature. But take your time and rewrite, or rather reread your script
yeah,
uh, a few times, and uh, be careful of some of the uh, phrases that you put in, because you don't actually want to put a quote from someone that could cause a civil case.
yes,
So you have to be careful about what you write, and the use of foul language. It shouldn't be something to use except in a particular situation.
hmm,
Don't have someone because there are people out there that you talk to, they can hardly throw out a sentence without curse words and things. So be careful how you use the foul language.
hmm, that's great. And you did mention working with Authors Press. Can you just talk a little bit more about your experience with working with Authors Press?
Well, so far, I had the misfortune of being uh, hooked up with an organization that kind of stole me from Authors Press.
Hmm,
When my book first came out,
mhm,
and so Authors Press is kind of working with me to overcome that situation, and the CEO is going to be visiting me one day next week, and to go over things, because it's kind of a mixed up affair, and I do not want to make uh, any comments that could come back and bite me right now. So
No worries. Well,
But
just
but anyway, I'm having a good success. I'm being taken care of. I've got a lot of things coming up on the plate that they're taking care of, and I'm completely satisfied. And I would recommend any writer to go excuse me, go to Authors Press, because I think there may be better organizations and there may not be, but I think you would be satisfied by taking the Authors Press.
that's great. Um, and now I know that your book is offered on Authors Press. Is there any other places where you'd like to advertise?
Well, they do, of course, Amazon. There's quite a bit of 5-star recommendations on Amazon about each of my books that's out there,
Nice.
and also Barnes and Noble, and I think there's some kind of Apple thing that I can't always remember the name of it, but uh, I would suggest Barnes and Noble or Amazon, or if in the future there'll be some book fairs in the country that it will be available in, and I'm hoping in the future I may be able to to actually handle some book sales from the house too, and that's pending.
Hmm. Well, that'd be great. Well, I'm honestly, I think that that's all the questions that I had. Do you have any last final notes or comments or questions that you'd like to ask, Harold?
Uh, well, I'd like to say very satisfied with the trilogy, and I have a book 4 that should be uh, well, the Fulton Book. You can purchase books from Fulton Books, I believe, if you're like a bookstore dealer or something of that nature. And I have a book 4 coming out that is actually the 30-year military life of the protagonist, Travis Stolbane, in books 2 and 3. And it's a very interesting book, and it has some action, going on secret assignments and love stories and shoot 'em ups and so on and so forth. So it's kind of an interesting book, and it's got a great cover to it.
Okay, I'll take note of that.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's all the time that we had. I know we have a couple other interviews coming up, but I'd just like to thank you once again for coming on. For all those
Sure.
listening, this was Harold Weist. We were talking about his book Trek for the Cross, which is available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and Authors Press. Thank you so much for your time, and yeah. If anyone's looking for a good read, good inspiring story that's a little bit factual and historical, but has a nice, creative and family friendly side to it, this is the book for you.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much, Harold. And
Well, you're quite welcome.